Well, Donald Trump and Volodymyr Zelensky are on their way to mending their diplomatic relationship after the Ukrainian president agreed to a partial ceasefire with Russia during a lengthy phone call. Now, unusually, Trump floated the suggestion that perhaps the US could take over Ukraine's power plants. In a Truth Social post, Trump said the call was very good and he said negotiations were very much on track. And then Zelensky also posted that we believe that together with America, with President Trump and under American leadership, lasting peace can be achieved this year. Well, to discuss, let's bring in now Strategic Communications Director at the Australian Strategic Policy Institute, David Wroe. David, thanks for joining us. Now, the phone call, of course, does sound positive, but doesn't Trump really need to get Putin over the line to agree to a ceasefire, not Zelensky?
Absolutely. We're in a bit of a depressing dynamic, Shari. Vladimir Putin is giving away nothing and showing no credible signs that he's interested in peace, which is not surprising because he's not. Donald Trump is cutting Putin far too much latitude and needs to put a lot more pressure on him. And meanwhile, Volodymyr Zelensky is sort of caught in the middle, whereby he needs to keep Trump happy, avoid offending him or upsetting him. And he is, Donald Trump is quite easily offended and upset. And at the same time, he needs to lead his country in fighting back Vladimir Putin's aggression. So Volodymyr Zelensky is very much caught in the middle of this. He's clearly doing the best he can to agree to the proposals that are being put forward to him. But really, what we need to see is a lot more pressure on the Kremlin and on Vladimir Putin.
I thought it was really concerning last week when we saw that Trump temporarily cut off intelligence to Ukraine, and it seemed like Russia took advantage of that immediately and bombarded Ukraine in a way that it hadn't for some time. What can you tell us about that?
Yeah, look, I think it was always likely that Putin would use that opportunity to try and to push as hard as he could on Ukraine, to try and destroy its morale. Remember, Ukrainian morale has been very high and very sustained for 3 years now. They've taken enormous battering and they have dug as deep as any country could do in order to keep fighting. The blow that came, the morale blow that came with the discontinuation of US support, temporary though it was, must have been very, very severe in Ukraine. I think Putin took advantage of that. So, look, I would go back to the fact that this is all about now who has the strongest position going into negotiations. What we really need is for Putin to be weakened going into negotiations and be forced to make compromises. And we need Zelensky and the Ukrainians, their hand to be strengthened as much as possible. That includes on the battlefield, because whoever holds the battlefield advantage and the momentum is going to go into negotiations in a stronger position. That's really, really important. And of course, due to their size and their depth, the Russians have had that long-term, attrition-style advantage in the fight on the battlefield for the last year or so.
Yeah, all right. We'll stick with that story as it develops, of course. Now, I want to ask you about this fascinating piece. It ran in the Fin Review, but it was an international piece of journalism about Russia's continued use of honey traps to ensnare Western diplomats. And one diplomat in the article describes being surrounded by female Russian agents who were sent to entrap him. I mean, David, yes, it's very Cold War-esque, but it's so surprising, or maybe it isn't, that in the age of high tech, that there aren't more modern techniques used to extract information or encourage cooperation, that these old methods are still being used.
I mean, they say espionage is the second oldest profession in the world, so it makes sense, I suppose, to blend the oldest and the second oldest. I heard an intelligence chief once told me that he described it as hacking humans. Look, cyber espionage is big business, no doubt about it. There are high-tech ways of stealing secrets. But really, the greatest frailty, the greatest vulnerability are still those human weaknesses. And the obvious points of vulnerability are things like lust and greed and fear. So it makes sense that offering government officials sexual opportunities, or offering them bribes in the form of money, or putting the fear of God into them by threatening them with one thing or another, some kind of coercion, threatening their families, things like this, are the best way to flip them and get them to give away secrets. So it is extremely effective still. A vulnerable human is weaker than a well-protected computer system, unfortunately. If you want a quick anecdote at the risk of churning your viewers' stomachs, I did hear just recently about a Swedish a senior foreign affairs individual who was the intended victim of a honey trap. The woman was so persistent that in the end he actually feigned diarrhea just to get away from her, because nothing else was working. So that gives you an idea about what people have to deal with.
Well, they have to start training them at intelligence school to come up with good excuses for persistent Russian women in disguise. All right, David Wroe, really appreciate your time. Thank you so much.